All right, guys. Well, you see the title. Uh, Before we dive in. Transition. And again. Transition. Yeah. So, if you have seen the title, you have likely guessed what we're going to talk about in this video, in this nerd herd video. I, Zach, the great and wonderful, not so much. I'm going to defend one of my favorite games, The Legend of Zelda: Skyward Sword. I have a few points I want to bring up uh, during the video, and you'll see those as we go along. But before that, in the description down below is a link to our Patreon. If you could go check that out, that would be awesome. Now, let's get started. So, The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword is a game that came out for the Nintendo Wii back in 2011. It was a highly controversial game. Well, not highly controversial. It was a polarizing game. Many people thought it was good. Many people thought it was bad. Many people thought, there were aspects of it that were good. Many people thought there were aspects of it that were bad. Anyway, here are my thoughts on the game. It's overall a good game. Overall. Are there problems? Yes, but there are problems with every game. If you're sitting here saying, "Oh, their problems are too great to overcome," no, they're not. As Nathan and I discussed in the podcast episode last night, just because one aspect of something is bad and one aspect of something is, good, does not make the rest of the product fall in line with that particular aspect. All right. So, first point as to why I think Skyward Sword is a good game. The story. The story of Skyward Sword is actually pretty good. Excuse any drinks I take during this, as I am thirsty, and talking for prolonged periods of time makes you thirsty. Anyway, the story is pretty good. It actually gives us an origin story for many Zelda staples, including the Master Sword. Say hi to Nathan. Hi. Nathan, say hi.
No. I mean, hi. Hi to all of our lovely fans. Hello.
He loves you.
I do love you. Okay, bye.
All right. Now that the distraction is gone. By the way, you all thank Nathan for the graphics we have. He's actually done a good job on those.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But anyway, what was I saying? Oh, right. The story of Skyward Sword. It gives us many origin stories for many of the staples in the rest of the series. Like the Master Sword, the Triforce. It doesn't give us an origin story for the Triforce. We already had that. But it gives us an origin story for the Master Sword. The royal family of Hyrule, I guess. The interaction between the different races and all that other stuff. Gatorade. They didn't sponsor the video, but they produce pretty good drinks. Anyway, so also as part of the story, many forms of modern media try to include romance. Skyward Sword actually does it pretty well, and I would say that it among many other stories actually handles a love triangle well. Um, Again, Tim, who's been on the podcast a couple of times now, Tim Ulrich, he's gonna have. I'm gonna have to have. We're gonna have to have him on a Nerd Herd and just talk about story writing and things like love triangles and time travel and all that junk. See what his thoughts are. But generally, for me, love triangles aren't that good. They often distract from the story. The love triangle, it's not exactly a love triangle in Skyward Sword, but the love triangle is actually handled fairly well throughout the game. Groose goes from being a stereotypical schoolboy to actually a good person. The characterization of Link and Zelda is actually fairly good in this game. Girahim is one of the best written villains ever. I will not be taking comments on that. Girahim. As far as I like Girahim over Zant, the villain for the majority of The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, because from the beginning, or from their first meeting of Girahim, it's made clear that he is not the final boss. Zant was, from the beginning, made to be the final boss of Twilight Princess, and then there was more game, and surprise, Ganondorf. Not saying that Ganondorf in Twilight Princess is bad, it's just that they didn't write Zant particularly well, I don't think. Anyway, moving on. Girahim was written well. I actually like the idea of Demise. I like him being like the source of all evil. Just this, I promise you, you will be haunted by an incarnation of me throughout the rest of eternity. It's actually fairly awesome, which gives us another origin of the Zelda timeline. So anyway, the story is well written. Now, a controversial opinion. I think the motion controls were actually fairly good for the time. If you remember, when the Wii first came out back in 06, man, that was a long time ago. It was a pioneer. Excuse me, dinner's coming back. It was a pioneer in the in terms of motion, of like video game motion technology, and then they kept making improvements on it throughout the Wii's life cycle. And I think the Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword is actually a good indicator of that. It's actually a good example of here's an advancement in video game motion control technology, and it provided one-to-one sword tracking. Now, granted, was it perfect? No, but you have to consider how much of it is user error and how much of it is actual controller error. How much of it is your fault as the person swinging around the Wii remote, and how much of it is actually the fault of the Wii remote. Other than that, it's the motion controls can get in the way sometimes. I will admit that, but that just goes back to being I admit that they're not perfect, and I get it. Going back to areas in games is never fun. Oh, okay, it can be fun, but I think going back to certain temples in certain areas was fun because it's goes back to unlocking certain movement abilities. Excuse me while I give my back a little bit of support. It, it, like, okay, so I'm gonna draw a comparison to Kingdom Hearts. So there were a lot of things in Kingdom Hearts that weren't unlockable items until you got certain abilities later on in the game. So if you went to a certain place first and saw an item and couldn't get that item, it wasn't bad because you knew later on in the game, in the Kingdom Hearts, you'd be able to get an ability that says, okay, there is a chest. I see the chest. I can't get it right now, but I will be able to get it later. It's the same principle in Skyward Sword. One of the main collectibles is something called Goddess Cubes, which unlock chests up in the sky. And you see, I see this guy, I see that Goddess Cube. I can't get it right now, but I am sure I will unlock an item or an ability that will let me later on grab that cube or grab that chest, essentially. So it's I'm not saying the essence of this video is I'm not saying this game isn't without its flaws. I'm just saying the game isn't as bad as some people make it out to be. The where was I going next? The next facet I want to talk about is the music. The music of Skyward Sword is amazing. It's one of the games that was fully orchestrated for the Wii, and it was just it was one of the game. I'm not saying that the music before it and after it hasn't been good, but if you want to look at like peak Zelda music, Skyward Sword is one of the examples I'd point to. Let's see here. The did it have all the iconic musical compositions? No, but it had a lot of them. Again, so let's move on to the bosses. Girahim, I have a lot of people disparage it that you fight Girahim so many times. I actually think Girahim being able to fight the first boss in the game 2 more times afterwards, at least, is actually a good show of progression. Not only for Link as the character of you're assuming through willful suspension of disbelief, you're assuming that Link, as he travels through these lands and he defeats more and more enemies, he gets more skilled as he keeps going. And then it's also a progression of you getting used to the controls of, hey, look, I struggled with the first boss in the game, now I'm beating him easily. It's a progression of you and the character through the game. And that also goes for the imprisoned. A lot of people will say, oh, I hate that you fight him so many times. I'm sorry, I think the second fight is it's more of a show for Bruce's character development than anything. And the third imprisoned fight is also just amazing. I like it. It adds something, again, it adds something to the fight that makes it more challenging. Of course, the final boss of Demise is actually a pretty good final boss, not only lore-wise, but also, design-wise. Demise is actually one of the better designed villains I've ever seen, final bosses I've ever seen. Just like this huge, like, hulking figure with what looks like pitch black scales. He's muscled. He has fire for hair. Girahim is his freaking sword. He's actually a fairly well designed person, final boss. Um, Also, and a lot of people are going to get after me for the imprisoned comments. Again, I'm not saying that fighting a boss over and over again isn't annoying. I'm just saying, does the game add something to it? And they did. So, you know, that's awesome. I'm running out of things to say. But, uh, Skyward Sword is also, as far as art style goes, it is one of the most amazingly rendered games I've seen. Not just, Demise, not just Helium, but like the watercolor aesthetic that it has. It's just beautifully written, beautifully arted, beautifully rendered and everything. Skyloft is one of my favorite locations. Um, the I also like the side quests having like a final goal, of the gratitude crystals. It's not just, oh, I can get a semi-useful item, or I can get rupees, or you know something else out of this, or it's just the satisfaction of 100% in the game. It's, oh, look at this, I'm helping a person become, or I'm helping a person change through this work. It's the game is really well designed, from really, and the fact that they had to deal with the motion controls, which were still highly experimental. I could go on about the motion controls forever, because people are like, the motion controls didn't work all the time. The motion controls don't work all the time. Come on, guys. If your controllers worked 100% of the time, a lot of things. That's part of the challenge, honestly, of video games. Is sometimes, inexplicably, or maybe very explicably, controllers fail for no reason other than they just fail. But it's just I'm getting tired of people disparaging the game because the controls, the highly experimental controls, I should say, didn't work 100% of the time. And it's just amazing to me how people say, oh, the highly experimental controls didn't work all the time, when controllers we had up until then didn't work 100% of the time. Oh. Now, there's one thing I haven't talked about, well, one character I haven't talked about yet, and that is the character of Fi, however you say her name. I get it, y'all. I get the complaints of how she is, she constantly interrupts, she constantly is up in your face about everything. But I actually liked her story of, I am this robotic servant that does everything you want to, wow, I am experiencing emotions and everything for the first time. It's I actually liked her farewell scene in the game. It actually hit me emotionally the first time I watched it. Um, Not saying that's the only emotional gaming scene I've ever seen, but that's one of the most emotional I've seen. Is it just kind of hit me of, this is a character Link has actually grown to care about, and now they're having to say goodbye at the end of their adventure together. And a character I personally find more annoying in the game, more annoying than Fi, is Impa, or young Impa, I should say. not the old Impa that's in the game. She's more of a guy. Old Impa's more of a guide, but young Impa, there's just one scene in the game at the end of the the first Elden temple, where she's like, "Link, you're late. Link, why haven't you saved Zelda? If it wasn't for me, Link, Zelda would be captured." I'm just like, come on. It appears to me that you weren't actually fighting your way through the temple or fighting your way up to the temple. You could have actually gathered the keys for him and unlocked the door. You could have, you know, you appear you appeared right in front of him and flipped the switch for a bridge for him. You could have just waited for him on the other end of the bridge, and it could have been like, "Follow me, and I'll take you to Zelda." But no, she's just like, "I'm gonna yell at you for being late," even though I could have helped you along. You could have helped him solve more puzzles. You could have just traveled with him. But no, you were just like, "Yeah, I'm gonna yell at you, and I'm gonna blame you, and I'm gonna call you unfit for being the goddess's chosen hero." Blah blah blah. Yeah. Now that I got my mini rant out of the way, um, it, again, overall, Skyward Sword is a good game, from the music to the controls that they experimented with, to the way they designed the game, like from a pure like sight perspective. It's honestly, talking about it is making me want to play the game again. So I might go play the game again. Before I do, I get the complaints that there are certain things that the game didn't do well, like retreading and all that junk. No game is perfect. I personally liked all the retreading. Anyway, I think that is where I'm going to end this video. So, where's my mouse? There it is. Hold on. I'm going to transition again, guys. Down in the Patreon. Actually, I'm going to transition to just once more. Again, Patreon is down in the description if you would like to support us, other than giving us likes and comments and subscribing to the YouTube channel. So basically, monetarily, go check the Patreon out. There are several different levels that you guys can subscribe to. One more transition. All right, guys. I think that's gonna be it for this episode. Have a good night.